Homeless man asks Donald Trump, "Can you give me $1?" Musk's response is shocking. Before we move forward, kindly hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell icon to get notifications from us. It was a crisp fall afternoon in New York City, the kind where the golden sun shone bright, but the chill in the air reminded everyone that winter was just around the corner. The streets were crowded as usual, with people bustling in and out of the subway stations, taxis honking, and street vendors peddling hot pretzels. But all eyes were on one spot: Trump Tower. The towering glass-covered structure loomed over Fifth Avenue, its lavish lobby visible through the massive windows. For many, the Trump Tower symbolized power and wealth, and it was a place that drew crowds every day, whether for business, luxury shopping, or simply for the spectacle. On this particular afternoon, as the crowd gathered around the entrance, a man with a worn coat and dirty shoes stepped forward, his face covered by the shadow of his tattered hoodie. His name was Michael, a homeless man who had wandered the streets of New York for years, surviving off odd jobs, charity, and whatever he could beg for on the street. As he approached the towering structure, he could see the gleaming reflection of Trump's name in the glass doors. He didn't expect much, people like him rarely did, but he thought that maybe, just maybe, he could ask the man who had built this towering empire for just $1. He needed food, a hot drink, something to take the edge off the chill. As he stood in front of the building, he saw Donald Trump himself step out of the revolving doors, his unmistakable blonde hair catching the light. Trump was flanked by his security team, his suit sharp and immaculate, his face wearing the same expression of arrogance and confidence that had made him famous. Michael hesitated for a moment before he gathered the courage to approach him. "Excuse me, Mr. Trump," Michael called out, his voice a mixture of hope and desperation. "Can you spare $1? I haven't eaten all day." Trump stopped in his tracks, his eyes briefly scanning the man. For a moment there was a flicker of something: indifference, maybe. Then without a word, Trump motioned to his security detail, who immediately stepped forward to block Michael's path. The former president's eyes didn't even meet Michael's as he turned on his heel and continued walking towards the sleek black SUV waiting for him by the curb. "Sorry," Trump muttered dismissively, as though the homeless man wasn't even worth acknowledging. The crowd, which had been milling about, seemed to hold its breath for a moment. It was the kind of response that people had come to expect from Trump: cold, unfeeling, and calculated. For Michael, it was another crushing reminder of the divide between the powerful and the powerless. But just as Trump climbed into the car and the doors slammed shut, something unexpected happened. From the edge of the crowd, a man stepped forward. He was tall, with short cropped hair, and a lean, almost otherworldly presence. It was Elon Musk, the billionaire tech mogul and CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, known for his futuristic ambitions and unorthodox public persona. Musk had been walking past Trump Tower, on his way to a nearby meeting, when he had witnessed the entire exchange. Seeing the way Trump had brushed Michael off, without a second thought stirred something inside him. Musk had always prided himself on thinking differently, not following the conventional path, and this moment felt like a perfect opportunity to make a statement about empathy and compassion. Without hesitation, Musk walked up to Michael, who was still standing there, visibly shaken by the encounter with Trump. "Hey," Musk said, offering a smile that didn't seem rehearsed. "I saw what happened. You're all right." Michael looked up in surprise, not knowing what to say. Musk reached into his pocket, pulled out a crisp $100 bill, and handed it to the homeless man. "Here," Musk said, "this is for you, go get yourself something nice." Michael took the bill, stunned. It wasn't just the money, it was the unexpected kindness from someone who had every reason to ignore him, just like everyone else. The crowd, which had gathered to witness Trump's arrival, now turned their attention to Musk and the homeless man. The scene, captured by an onlooker's phone, quickly went viral, sparking a flurry of debate on social media and news outlets. In a matter of minutes, the story of the encounter outside Trump Tower spread across the globe. People were stunned, shocked, and even inspired by Musk's act of generosity. Meanwhile, Trump's cold response lingered in the background, leaving many to wonder. Was this a rare moment of humility from a billionaire, or was it a carefully crafted move to position himself as the true face of compassion in a world of cutthroat elites? Little did anyone know, this seemingly small act of kindness would spark a firestorm of controversy and force Donald Trump to address the way he had treated Michael on the streets of New York. The morning after the encounter outside Trump Tower, the story exploded across the internet. News outlets from every corner of the globe picked up the story, each one with a slightly different spin on what had transpired. Headlines screamed from every digital and print page. Elon Musk gives $100 to homeless man after Trump refuses to spare a dollar, or billionaire generosity, Musk's kindness versus Trump's coldness. Social media was abuzz, with everyone from political pundits to everyday citizens weighing in. The contrast between Trump's dismissive treatment of Michael and Musk's surprising act of generosity couldn't have been more glaring. Comment sections under the viral video were flooded with mixed reactions. Some praised Musk for showing kindness to a man in need, calling him the true example of what a billionaire should be. Others questioned if Musk had simply seized the opportunity to make himself look better, capitalizing on Trump's coldness to garner positive attention. In New York, the scene outside Trump Tower became a mini-media circus. News crews camped outside the iconic building, hoping for another dramatic moment. Michael, the homeless man at the center of it all, had become a symbol of something much larger, a metaphor for the poor and marginalized in American society, and the gap between the rich and the rest of the population. Yet, as the cameras gathered around him, he remained a mystery. No one really knew his backstory, and reporters were eager to track him down to hear his side of the story. Meanwhile, inside Trump Tower, things were quieter. The former president, who had been known for thriving in the spotlight, was not used to being on the defensive. His team had already prepared a statement, but Trump himself had yet to make a public response. He had always been a polarizing figure, but this latest exchange seemed to stir up something different, something personal. It wasn't just his usual political opponents questioning him this time. Even some of his supporters were starting to voice their discontent about how he had treated Michael. Some speculated that Trump might feel the pressure to address the issue head-on. Inside his penthouse, Trump sat at a grand mahogany desk, reading through the latest news reports. His fingers tapped the surface of the desk, in frustration as he skimmed through the articles. Why is everyone making such a big deal about this? He thought, his mind racing. He had expected people to be talking about his latest business ventures or the rallies he had planned, not about a random interaction on the streets of New York. But that wasn't the problem. The problem was Musk. Trump knew that his relationship with Elon Musk had always been complicated. Musk had never been one to play by the same rules as the other billionaires. He had often criticized Trump's policies, even though both men shared the same elite status. Musk had publicly distanced himself from Trump during his presidency, and now this. It felt like a challenge, a direct comparison of their character that Trump wasn't prepared for. He picked up the phone and dialed his communications director. "We need a response. Make sure we get ahead of this," Trump barked into the receiver. "Find out who this guy is, and let me know what Musk's angle is. I'll deal with this in my own way." As the day went on, Trump's media team scrambled to craft a response. They needed to deflect the negative press, but they also needed to navigate the waters with Musk, who had become a figure just as famous for his unpredictability as Trump was for his own. The team suggested a simple, direct statement acknowledging the encounter. Trump, however, was already planning something bigger. He would not let Musk's moment of kindness overshadow his own narrative. Meanwhile, Musk had already taken to Twitter to comment on the viral video. His tweet was succinct, yet it carried a weight that no one could ignore. "Empathy is a choice, not an obligation. We are all human, and we all deserve a chance. For it all. Where can some bacon?" The tweet gained millions of likes within hours, and Musk's words reverberated across the media, especially given the contrast to Trump's silence. For Michael, the homeless man who had sparked the storm, life had taken an unexpected turn. After Musk's act of kindness, he had been invited to several interviews, and people started offering him help. He was overwhelmed by the attention, unsure how to navigate the sudden spotlight. But deep down, Michael understood that it wasn't about him. It was about the larger conversation that had been ignited, the relationship between the ultra-wealthy and the millions of Americans struggling to make ends meet. As the media frenzy continued, Trump's office finally released a statement, but it was anything but a simple apology. In his statement, Trump claimed that he was not the right person to be asked for a dollar, implying that his wealth was far beyond what a simple dollar could represent. He also hinted that his refusal was due to his focus on bigger issues facing the country, suggesting that someone like him could not be expected to offer charity on the streets. Musk, on the other hand, remained silent, letting his actions speak for themselves. The media frenzy surrounding the $1 request, and the contrasting reactions of Donald Trump and Elon Musk, only grew in intensity. For days the story dominated headlines, with every major outlet from CNN to Fox News weighing in on the controversy. Political analysts, social media influencers, and even everyday citizens discussed the events in varying tones, from admiration for Musk's generosity to scorn for Trump's apparent coldness. The public's response was a polarizing mix of admiration for Musk and deepening criticism of Trump. Musk, the tech billionaire known for his ventures into space and electric cars, had always been a figure of intrigue, but this act of kindness placed him in a new light. He was seen by many as someone who defied the stereotypes of the self-absorbed billionaire, opting instead to show compassion where others turned away. For Trump, the story had spiraled far beyond what he had anticipated. His dismissive refusal to give $1 to a homeless man had stirred the pot in ways he hadn't predicted. While his loyal base remained supportive, the broader American public was quick to criticize. We deputt de kwaden imorg, en be ender de periken imor, we deprep de kwaden inteen. News outlets began to speculate that this might be a turning point, a moment when Trump's image, carefully curated over decades, might finally begin to crack. The former president, never one to shy away from controversy, found himself defending his actions on multiple platforms. In term, huet sapt wanterbitsbelputted. In a rare move, Trump granted an exclusive interview to a high-profile news anchor, hoping to quell the storm. The studio was filled with bright lights and cameras, but the tension in the room was palpable. The question was simple but cutting. Mr. Trump, why did you refuse to help a man asking for just $1? Trump leaned back in his chair, his usual confident smirk absent. Look, he began, I'm a businessman, not a charity organization. I've done more for this country than most, and people are always asking for something, but $1. That's just not the way I do things. We need big solutions to fix the problems we're facing, not just handing out dollar bills to anyone who asks. The anchor pressed further, but doesn't that response seem a bit cold, especially in the context of the situation? Couldn't a gesture, however small, have helped humanize you? Trump's eyes narrowed, and for a brief moment, he seemed irritated. I'm not here to be anyone's humanitarian. People want to take what they can from you. The reality is, if I gave $1 to every person who asked, I wouldn't be able to do anything productive. My focus is on helping this country, not giving away my wealth to people who need to pull themselves up. Meanwhile, Musk remained remarkably quiet in the aftermath of the interview. His Twitter had been filled with supportive comments, as well as some criticism, but he had refrained from addressing Trump's words directly. Instead, he took a different approach. The next day, Musk announced a new initiative aimed at tackling homelessness in America. The initiative, backed by his companies Tesla and SpaceX, would create sustainable, low-cost housing for the homeless, with a focus on providing long-term solutions instead of temporary handouts. Musk's announcement was groundbreaking. It wasn't just a donation, it was a practical large-scale project designed to address homelessness in a meaningful way. The plan included building affordable modular homes, with space for self-sufficiency and job opportunities for the homeless. Musk's initiative quickly gained traction, with several local governments reaching out to collaborate. Back in New York, the fallout from Trump's refusal to help Michael outside Trump Tower continued to dominate conversations. Political commentators had a field day, dissecting Trump's interview and contrasting it with Musk's proactive stance. Even some of Trump's former allies began to quietly distance themselves, suggesting that his response might have been out of touch with the struggles faced by everyday Americans. The tension between the two billionaires reached new heights. Trump, feeling the pressure, began lashing out on social media, calling Musk's initiative a publicity stunt. Musk thinks he can solve problems with a few fancy homes and a lot of PR, Trump tweeted. He's got no idea how hard it is to really fix the issues of this country. Musk, unfazed by the criticism, responded simply, "Actions speak louder than words." In the wake of the media storm, Michael, the homeless man at the center of it all, found himself receiving offers of help from every corner. A local charity reached out to offer him shelter and job training, while a GoFundMe campaign raised thousands of dollars for his future. Though his life had been turned upside down, Michael had become a symbol of the deep socio-economic divide in the United States, a divide that had been so starkly illuminated by the $1 request outside Trump Tower. But for all the good that came from the media frenzy, Michael remained somewhat skeptical. "People see me as some kind of symbol," he said quietly during an interview with a local news station. "But I'm just a guy trying to survive. I never thought it would go this far." The deeper issues of wealth disparity and homelessness, though, were now at the forefront of national conversation. Musk had done his part in the form of action, and Trump, whether he liked it or not, had sparked a dialogue that forced many Americans to reflect on their views of wealth and generosity. The battle between the two billionaires was far from over, but for now, the public had made its judgment. Musk's actions had put him on a pedestal, while Trump, the man who had built an empire on his own terms, was left to reckon with his response. The fallout was far-reaching, but it also served as a stark reminder of how public perceptions of power, generosity, and humanity could shift in an instant. The public debate between Donald Trump and Elon Musk over the $1 request outside Trump Tower had escalated beyond what either billionaire had expected. While Musk's actions had resonated with millions, Trump found himself facing the harsh glare of public scrutiny like never before. His supporters remained vocal, but the tide of public opinion had started to turn against him, especially as the media pitted him against Musk, the new face of billionaire compassion. Despite the mounting pressure, Trump was resolute. His public persona was built on the idea of self-reliance, and he was determined not to let anyone question his values. In his mind, the backlash over the $1 incident was just another example of the media twisting his words and actions for their own agenda. But the situation had reached a tipping point when Trump made his next public statement. At a campaign rally in Ohio, he took the stage to thunderous applause, but the crowd quieted as he launched into an unexpected tirade. "Some people think that because I have money, I should just give it away, hand it out to anyone who asks. Well, let me tell you something. There's a right way and a wrong way to help people," Trump began, his voice booming across the stadium. "You don't solve the country's problems by just handing out $1 here and there. You don't fix homelessness with handouts. You fix it with jobs, with hard work, and with policies that make America great again." The crowd cheered in approval, but the rhetoric sounded increasingly hollow in the face of the ongoing controversy. Behind the scenes, Trump's advisors scrambled to contain the fallout, knowing that his refusal to empathize with Michael could have broader political ramifications. The backlash from certain factions of his own party was becoming impossible to ignore. Some of his more moderate supporters, even those who admired his business acumen, began to question his values. Meanwhile, Musk's popularity soared. His decision to fund a homelessness initiative was one thing, but his social media presence, particularly his calm, almost zen-like responses to Trump's attacks, further cemented his status as the cool-headed billionaire, the one who cared about solutions, not spectacle. Musk's tweet about empathy had gained millions of likes, and his ongoing work to address homelessness continued to garner attention. The more Trump dug in, the more Musk leaned into his message of hope and action. In the following days, the media focused on Musk's public appearances, especially when he took the stage at a tech conference in San Francisco. As expected, the conference quickly shifted from discussions of space exploration and electric vehicles to the ongoing saga between the two billionaires. Musk was asked about his thoughts on Trump's recent comments, and he responded with characteristic humility. "I believe in action over words," Musk said, his voice steady. "If you really want to make a difference in people's lives, you don't need to talk about it, you need to do it. That's why I started the initiative for affordable housing. People deserve more than just a handout, they deserve a chance at a better life." The response was met with applause, and Musk's words seemed to resonate with the audience, composed largely of young progressive tech enthusiasts. Hulse. Igdes. His stance on the issue of homelessness felt authentic, and his actions spoke louder than any political rhetoric. For many, Musk's approach to philanthropy, pragmatic, forward-thinking, and compassionate, became a stark contrast to Trump's divisive and calculated political maneuvers. When expected, Ibdes. Back in New York, Michael, the homeless man who had unwittingly become the catalyst for this national debate, found himself at the center of a media circus. Invitations for interviews poured in, with outlets asking for his perspective on both Trump's refusal and Musk's generosity. Michael, however, remained somewhat detached from the growing storm around him. Though he had been the one to ask Trump for $1, he wasn't concerned with the political chess match that was unfolding. "I never expected any of this," Michael said in one of his first interviews. "I was just hungry, you know. I just asked for $1, never thinking it would turn into something like this." Though he was humbled by Musk's gesture, Michael still struggled with the sudden attention. He had always lived in the shadows, moving from one street to another, trying to survive. Now he was being held up as an example of something larger, a symbol of the socio-economic divide, the struggle between the wealthy and the impoverished. However, despite his discomfort with the media attention, Michael's life was undeniably changing. He had been offered a place to stay, as well as job opportunities, thanks to the charitable contributions of Musk's supporters. Some were even calling for Michael to be the face of Musk's initiative, a living testament to the impact his actions could have on real lives. Meanwhile, Trump's camp continued to downplay the situation, emphasizing that the former president had far more important issues to tackle. His advisors urged him to stay the course, believing that his base would ultimately back him, regardless of the media frenzy. But even some of his closest allies privately wondered whether Trump had miscalculated, whether this incident had exposed an unflattering side of him that could ultimately cost him in the long run. And as the days passed, one thing became clear: Musk had managed to shift the conversation. By focusing on real-world solutions, rather than political posturing, he had positioned himself as a figure who cared more about people than profits, more about action than words. And while Trump continued to fight back with his usual bravado, it was increasingly clear that the public was tired of the old rhetoric. Musk's response was clear: empathy was not just a virtue, it was a choice. Weeks passed, and the saga between Donald Trump and Elon Musk continued to unfold in the public eye. The media storm eventually began to subside, but the impact of the story, the sharp contrast between Musk's generosity and Trump's cold dismissal, remained a topic of discussion. In the political landscape, as well as among the general public, the story had become a symbol of something much deeper: the evolving role of wealth and power in society, and the expectations placed on those who hold it. For Trump, the battle was far from over. Despite his initial defiance, he found himself increasingly isolated in the political arena. His refusal to acknowledge the moral weight of the situation, and his focus on defending his business practices, instead of showing empathy, had created a rift within his base. Conservative commentators, who had once supported him, now began to question whether his response had been out of touch with the Media continued to scrutinize his every word. Trump seemed to double down on his narrative. At a rally in Pennsylvania, he addressed the controversy head-on. "I've built this country up, I've made this country stronger, and I don't need to apologize for saying no to a man who wants $1. What I've done for this country is far more valuable than any handout." The crowd cheered, but the reactions were noticeably less enthusiastic than before. The media had painted Trump as someone who saw no value in offering kindness, no interest in addressing the immediate needs who struggled. His refusal to show any empathy for Michael had become a defining moment in his public image, one that would linger in the minds of many. In contrast, Musk's stock had never been higher. The initiative he had started to combat homelessness continued to gain momentum, attracting widespread praise.
Communities across the country began to explore ways they could partner with Musk's companies to implement sustainable housing solutions. His Twitter feed was flooded with messages of support, and many saw him as the new face of responsible wealth, someone who could use his influence to create real change, not just lip service. Musk's approach was grounded in practical solutions. As he toured one of the new modular homes that had been built as part of his homelessness initiative in Texas, he was asked about the growing comparisons between him and Trump. "It's not about being a hero," Musk said in a calm, measured tone. "It's about taking responsibility for the world you live in. We all have a role to play, and if we're in a position to help, then we should." As his project progressed, the impact on the people it served was undeniable. Formerly homeless individuals now had access to a safe, stable environment in which to live, work, and rebuild their lives, and many of them began to speak out about how the initiative had changed their perspective on what was possible. Michael, the man who had sparked this entire national debate, had his own quiet victory. No longer living on the streets, he had moved into one of the new modular homes funded by Musk's initiative. He found steady work at a local cafe, and for the first time in years, had a sense of hope for the future. He had even started speaking at community events, sharing his story as a symbol of the transformative power of generosity. But perhaps the most surprising outcome was that, despite his own discomfort with the media circus, Michael had begun to see his role in the wider conversation. He wasn't just a face in the crowd anymore, he was a representative of something larger, an example of how empathy and meaningful action could change lives. He had, in a way, become the embodiment of the conversation about wealth and responsibility that Musk had sparked. For Trump, the loss was harder to accept. While he had managed to maintain his supporters, the fact that Musk had turned the narrative into a force for change left Trump on the defensive.
Singing path, the can't of heart of art, the can't of any epsav, the can't of any epsav.
In private moments, he questioned whether his harsh response had cost him something more than just a media cycle. It had cost him the image of the compassionate leader. Trump's political future now seemed uncertain, especially with the rise of figures like Musk, who presented a radically different kind of leadership. Months later, as the dust settled, it became clear that the incident outside Trump Tower had become a defining moment in the conversation about class, wealth, and empathy in America. Musk's actions had spoken louder than words, while Trump's actions had done the opposite. What had started as a simple request for $1 had evolved into a larger conversation about how those with power and influence should use their wealth to serve society. In the end, the story wasn't just about Trump, Musk, or even Michael. It was about the choices that individuals, especially those with vast resources, make when faced with the opportunity to help others.
What had started as a simple request for $1 had evolved into a larger conversation about how the Klani Epsav.
And it was clear that while Trump had chosen to defend his wealth and principles, Musk had embraced a future where action, empathy, and responsibility were paramount. For Michael, the homeless man who had asked for $1, the lesson was simple: a small act of kindness could create ripples far beyond what anyone could expect. And for those watching, it became a reminder that how we treat the most vulnerable among us says more about who we are than anything else. The story of the $1 request outside Trump Tower had come full circle, leaving behind more questions than answers, but also a renewed sense of hope that in the end the future could be shaped not by the amount of wealth one has, but by the way that wealth is used to change lives.